Hello, everybody. So here we are. Today is the 7th of November, 2025. And this is the day that the sun transitions from the days of gorse into the days of heather. Technically speaking, that's the 15th degree of Scorpio, which is the midpoint between autumn equinox and winter solstice. So technically that's solar Samhain as a cross-quarter festival, the midpoint between solstice and equinox today. Though some people celebrate on All Hallows Eve, and some people are even going to wait a bit longer for the new moon following this moment. So in a week or two, so everybody observes Samhain and Imbolc differently. Really now I've come to see all of those festivals as windows of time. So just like for a lot of people, Christmas or Yule lasts about 5 or 6 days. And I think you can kind of do that with every festival, really, so, but technically today is the midpoint between equinox and solstice. So I'm just going to bring up my PowerPoint presentation. Today we're talking not so much about heather, because we've done that in the years past, but mainly we're talking about mycelium. Right, so for those that don't know, this is our 5th year around the Ogham Grove, as far as YouTube's concerned. Is it 5 years? 4 years? Can't remember. Yeah, 4 years. So if you want basic law of heather, that is the year 2022. So you can go on the Ogham Grove YouTube channel and put heather 2022 and you'll get the basic law of heather. And the following year, 2023, we did herbalism and aromatherapy and medicine and so on. So if you want the herbalism medicine law of heather, look for heather 2023. Last year, 2024, we looked at gods and goddesses that corresponded with each tree. And this year, we're looking at the Grove cards from the recently published Ogham Grove Oracle deck. So the Grove cards are ideas of what you can do magically or spiritually or esoterically inside your grove. So there's a lot there. And next year, we're going to go back to basics and look at the word kennings from Ireland relating to each of the Ogham trees. So again, 2022, basic law, 2023, herbalism, 2024, gods and goddesses. This year, esoteric ideas from the Ogham Grove Oracle deck. So here's today's Grove card and the topic of this presentation. So on the left-hand side is the Grove card called Mycelium, and it depicts someone's bare feet standing on the lawn and 2 fly agaric mushrooms, and all of the action is going on under the ground. So what is mycelium? I'm not going to get too scientific and too complicated, because hand on heart, I don't know a lot about it, really. There's a lot to explore, a lot to learn. I don't remember scientific terminology, but basically mycelium is the root system of mushrooms, or rather the mycelium is actually the tree or the plant itself. The mushroom is the fruit. The mushroom is the apple on the tree, so it's not really about the mushroom. The mushroom is just a fruit from that underground network of branches and twigs that are these amazing fibers. Now, the big thing about mycelium that's come through, I think, just in the last 2 decades, 20 years or more, people are learning things all the time, but the mycelium is an underground network of these fibers that aren't just the the living system of the mushroom, this underground network of fibers is a whole internet of webs and fibers of the forest. The forest uses it to communicate with itself, to pass information from tree to tree and shrub to shrub. So people are actually calling it the wood wide web. It's like the internet, but it's under the ground. And there's a kind of physicality to it because it is roots and fibers. But I'm going to take a bit of a dive into more esoteric webs as well. So the esoteric mycelium between people, but understanding it from, maybe we're being taught it by the Wood Wide Web, you know. So where am I going with that? I'll explain shortly. Here we are at this moment in time, and on the right-hand side, you can see the wild heath, and that's anchored around Scorpio. And right now, today, we're in that midpoint between gorse and heather. But Samhain and the wild heath are the mystery of the fourth quarter. And we descended after the autumn equinox down, and we're working our way down into the ground, down into the roots, down into the mycelium, all the way to the yew tree at the winter solstice, which is the conclusion of the fourth ACMA. Now, here's an interesting thing then, that after the yew tree at the bottom, the first ACMA begins. The yew tree holds the winter solstice and the rebirth of the sun, and then a brand new Ogham cycle begins with the birch tree going into the rowan tree, alder tree, willow tree, and ash tree takes us to the spring equinox. So right now we're descending down into the earth, down into the realm of mycelium, and then we're going to be coming up back to daylight, if you like, back to above ground at the spring equinox. Now, here's a curious thing, and I don't believe this was understood in ancient days. Maybe it was. I don't know how well the ancient people understood mycelium, or whether they just had a more empathic, intuitive connection with the forest and the trees rather than a scientific botanical understanding. But the fly agaric mushroom, the wonderful red mushroom with the white specks on it, grows primarily, strictly to two trees. And the main tree that it is symbiont with is the birch tree. So that fly agaric mushroom, that wonderful mystical mushroom, is right at the beginning of the Ogham cycle with the birch tree, the beginning of the first ACMA, if you like. The second tree that it grows with is the pine tree, and the pine tree begins the fourth ACMA. So if you've got woodland with pine and birch, that's the fourth ACMA and the first ACMA, and that's where you're going to get your fly agaric mushrooms. Now, here's another thing, staying with the theme of mycelium. The fourth ACMA, from autumn equinox onward, takes us into the autumn, and that is not only corresponding to the fly agaric mushroom, but is primarily corresponding to all of the autumn mushrooms, which are including the psilocybin magic mushroom, as well as at the end of summer plants like mugwort. So there's something in the medicine of the fourth ACMA, fly agaric mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, mugwort being harvested. This whole fourth quarter is very much the shamanic medicine quarter. I'm not saying we should all go off eating fly agaric mushrooms, but it's interesting to observe that this descending down into the soil is also the medicine of the soil through those mycelium networks and those mystical mushrooms. It's an interesting time. Part of that wild heath wild hunt thing is the psychopompic journey to the spirit world or the dream world or the shamanic world, you know, and nature is doing that at that time as well. Here's the psilocybin, not the psilocybin, here's the mycelium network below the ground then. And what I meant to say with this photo, because I don't have anything written down, I'm just ad-libbing with pictures as a stepping stone. In 2023, we looked at all of the 20 trees of the Ogham, and we looked at the herbalism relating to each of those trees. But one of the things we also looked at was which mushrooms and fungi are symbiont to each tree. So some mushrooms will grow anywhere on the forest floor, but a lot of fungi and mushrooms have a symbiont relationship to specific trees. For instance, like I said earlier, the birch tree is primarily the fly agaric tree. Now, as well as being mushrooms that give people shamanic journeys, and the fly agaric, if done as a macro dose, or people say a hero dose, you can leave your body entirely, you know, and I'm not recommending that. But it can be done. But the interesting thing from modern day research with the fly agaric mushroom and psilocybin magic mushrooms, there's a lot of information now on the internet about people using fly agaric and psilocybin in tiny, tiny doses. They call it micro dosing. And the commonality with these microdosing of fly agaric and psilocybin is it's helping people primarily with the mycelium of their own body. Now, the mycelium of your own body is your nervous system, your neurological pathways, your spinal cord, central nervous system, and then out through your peripheral nervous system. So all of your nerve endings are like your internal mycelium. And these mushrooms are helping people in two ways, restoring brain function. So that's the kind of the synapses of the brain, helping people with post-traumatic stress disorder and neurological pain and neurological problems, nervous issues and anxiety issues and so on. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, pondering, wondering that there's some sort of empathy or kindred magic, for want of a better word, between the mushrooms and the mycelium of the forest floor, and also the neurological system in the human body as a mycelium. And then I'm going to go right down a mad rabbit hole for the next 10 minutes or so, and looking at the psychic mycelium between people. And that takes us into ideas like the World Wide Web, or the web of weird, or the three sisters like the Norns of Norse mythology weaving the webs of fate, or the psychic connections between people is a mycelium too. So looking at those ideas, because everything's one thing, if you like, you know, so there's a physical expression of mycelium, as well as a neurological expression, and I would argue a psychic mycelium between people, between beings as well. Now, that's esoteric and it can't be proved, of course, so people will dismiss it as delusional nonsense. But plenty of us have had, what would you call it, paranormal experiences or extrasensory perceptions, or what have you, and the very nature of bardism or druidism is exploring the inner world, the psychic world, the world of dreams and visions, and so on. So modern druidry does have a word for the psychic reality, if you like. Though it's more than psychic, it's you could just say it as energy. But what does that mean? So there is this word, and it's taken from Welsh sources. So I think you pronounce it nuivra. That's how I pronounce it, nuivra. And it's a word that can be traced back to Welsh poetic writing of the 14th century. And it seems to be a word that means sky or atmosphere and ether. So, the finer, yeah, it's a loose term. And in modern druidry, people have taken it on board as meaning life force. And it's a life force that connects all things. So it's like something out of Star Wars. The force is strong. May the force be with you. That there's this force that interconnects all things, like mycelium. Everything is made of life force, and life force resonates with other life force, whether it's touching it or not. It doesn't need to actually have physical connection. And you can get right down a mad rabbit hole with things like quantum physics, where you've got something called non-locality. And the idea of non-locality is that you can have twin particles and separate them by ridiculous distances. Theoretically, you could have one particle here and another particle at the distant galaxy, and you stimulate this particle, and the one in the distant galaxy reacts. That they call it non-locality, because even though they're far apart, they're kind of in the same place. So it makes no sense whatsoever, but it's a valid comprehension from the world of quantum physics. That is, things resonate, whether they're touching each other or not. And what makes them resonate with each other, who knows? The life force, the love, or kindred spirit, whatever it is. So things came to my awareness this summer. I haven't had time to explore things thoroughly, but for certain, the rest of my life, I'm going to be thinking of these ideas and building upon them as very much a new venture, a modern frontier of exploration into the psychic world, or the inner world, or nuivra, or however you want to get your head around it. So before I was into the Ogham, which for me began around 2010, so it's 15 years now, I'd already had a background in Tai Chi and Qigong from the year 2000, so that's 25 years ago. So I tend to look at things from this Taoist perspective of these three energy centers in the body. Now, what is that? I'm not going to get too complicated about it, but you have your life force, you have your energy. The Chinese call it Qi, C-H-I. And so that's the same as life force or nuivra. It's just that my understanding of it comes from a Chinese Taoist martial art perspective. It doesn't equip me at all, really, for understanding the mycelium and energy of the forest. It gives me a rough idea of the energy in my own body and my own neurological mycelium inside my body, and how that energy flows around a little bit. But it dawned on me that the mycelium and the forest itself can teach us the interconnectedness of lots of things, not just mushrooms being good for our neurological issues, but that the trees themselves are generating energy. The trees are generating life force or nuivra, and that's a field of energy that we are part of. So some of the things I say come from my Taoist Tai Chi background, but these three areas are traditional Celtic, Irish law. So again, from about the 14th century, a manuscript was found describing three cauldrons. So there's a lower cauldron, a middle cauldron, and an upper cauldron. And this was primarily used by Irish poets for getting inspired poetry. So it's connected with the goddess Brigid, because Brigid is the goddess of poetic inspiration. And that very much seems to be anchored around Imbolc and the first Akma and the rising of energy coming up through the mycelium back to the daylight ideas. So I was putting this talk together or thinking about it, and I was thinking about the three cauldrons and how they would relate to mycelium concepts. And this is just ideas which I want to talk about with you guys. I'm not saying this is how any of it is. These are my educated guesses, speculation, but certainly something I think worth exploring. So when we do our meditation at the end, as part of the build up to the visualization, we often describe standing at the center of a grove in the forest, and that the forest floor is alive with the mycelium network and the trees communicating with each other. And the lovely idea that you can stand physically in the center of a grove and through the soles of your feet connect with the mycelium network under the ground, that you can literally, physically plug in. So I'm going to contradict myself and say there's a physical nature of standing in a grove and making a connection with the forest floor. The contradiction is that energy, the life force, is non-physical. So there's a paradox there, so there's a physicality to the three cauldrons, but it's also just pure energy, which is very hard to measure and quantify, but you can experience it, and that's the key thing. So from a Tai Chi Qigong perspective, the lower cauldron is your first point of contact with the mycelium of the forest floor. Now that's, you can look at reflexology and acupressure and things like that to understand how the energy flows around the human body. But primarily, the lower cauldron is your pelvic bowl, everything below your belly button, and so on. And it connects through your legs to the ground. It has a physical connection with the physical world. And the main energy flow of that is your kidney channel. So the lower cauldron is your kidney channel, but primarily it connects with the ground and energetically would go down through your feet into the mycelium network. So it's purely about restoring your battery, putting energy in your lower cauldron, building up your life force, putting the force or the nuivra into your belly, bringing it into your body, bringing it into your neurological network of what's inside your flesh and bone, if you like. So the lower cauldron has that connection with the physical world, although the energy we're talking about is non-physical, but it has that connection. That would be your first point of contact with mycelium. And it's interesting because the mycelium is physical. Now, the middle cauldron is a different kettle of fish entirely, and do a lot of talking about that. It's a bridge, or it's non-locality. It's one particle and another particle sharing the same place but not being anywhere near each other, in the sense that your middle cauldron is the center of your physical body, but it's also your eternal self. And there's a lot there. So it's where the physical you and your eternal you come together. And so I call that the eternal self and your inner world. So your health and your vitality is in your lower cauldron, and the life force bubbles up from the lower cauldron to the middle cauldron. And then your brain is going to perceive information from your middle cauldron in dreams and visions and thoughts and ideas from the inner world, your inner world, and from your spirit world. It's all coming up through your middle cauldron. There's a lot there. There's a lot to talk about. So your vitality, your health and well-being is your lower cauldron. Your middle cauldron is your compass and your connection to your eternal self. Now, the upper cauldron is of the body. Again, it's almost like if you think of an atom, like a circular atom, in the center of the atom is a nucleus, and that nucleus is the middle cauldron. And the upper cauldron and the lower are at the circumference of the atom. So the lower cauldron is putting vitality into your body. And if everything is functioning properly, then your upper cauldron becomes radiant and shiny with spirit. But the Chinese use the word spirit in a different way to how we use it in the West. So in the West, we can also think of the spirit as your eternal self. That's not that. That's your soul, that's your eternal being, or whatever. So the Chinese idea of spirit with the lower cauldron is charisma, shining, radiant brow, that the lights are on, that there's a shiny happiness of vitality. And this goes in with the Irish poets and the Welsh law of Taliesin. Now, the difference, why I'm saying it's part of the physical body, because there's a bitter pill that your brain will perish one day. When your body dies, your brain will perish. Your brain is not your eternal self. Nothing in your body, nothing in your physical body is, but your brain will shine if the energy and vitality is rising. So, but if you were brokenhearted and devastated and in a complete mental breakdown, and the lights in your eyes were turned off, that you were completely closed and dead in your head, you are still an eternal spirit. That it's just the mind has malfunctioned for whatever reason. So that's why I'm saying the shininess isn't your eternal spirit, it's the spirit of your vitality and the radiant connection. That you're an eternal being regardless of what's going on, whether the lights are on or not. You're an eternal being, and the connection with your eternal self is in your middle cauldron. Energetically, it's the nucleus of the atom. So how does that relate to mycelium? So these are some things I've learned this year, and we kind of touched on them a little bit in France, but in honesty, I'm still feeling my way, and I still am still trying to figure things out. And I'm really not at all interested in creating any dogma. I am interested in like-minded people exploring and sharing their findings. That between all of us, we can kind of explore and learn and share. So first thing I learned this year was the theories of a man called Oliver Reiser. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He came up with this idea called the psychosphere. He was a friend of Albert Einstein. He was a bit of a brilliant professor, maybe a bit eccentric, but he was exploring psychic abilities, telepathy, things like that. And he came up with this idea of what he called the psychosphere. So just like the planet has an atmosphere, between the atmosphere and ground level, he saw a field of energy around the planet, and he gave it the name psychosphere. And for him, it was a sphere of psychic energy. You could call it the force or nuivra. He didn't give it a name, but he believed that this field of energy around the planet allowed people to have telepathy with each other. It allowed people to feel how a loved one was doing, whether they were in trouble or not. That, you know, people can feel loved ones even if they're not on the other side of the planet. You know, those kind of ideas. Or you're thinking of someone and the telephone rings. That kind of empathy with people. How does that work? You know, that there are these kind of connections. And so if there's a connection between one pineal gland and another pineal gland, or between one heart and another heart, middle cauldron, you know, if there is a soul connection, and that's your middle cauldron, if there's a soul connection between two people, then they can feel how each other is, no matter how far apart they are, like the non-locality things, you know, that on some level, there just is oneness, or one consciousness, or whatever. So that was Oliver Reiser's theory. And he also called it the great memory. So it's like a memory field. So you could, what we were looking at in France a little bit is that you can go anywhere and plug in to the mycelium under the ground, energetically make a connection with that place wherever you are, and then open up your middle cauldron and use your upper cauldron to try and feel the memory of that place. You know, you can go to a castle and pick up information about who lived there and what they did. You know, you can go to some town and get impressions about things that happened in the 18th century or whatever, you know, that there are. So there's a psychic connection between people, between their hearts and their pineal glands. And then there's also that we ourselves can plug in and tune in to the memory of a place. Now, Professor Reiser went even further to suggesting that the planet itself, the entire planet, Gaia, was one brain or one conscious entity. And his theory was that our individual pineal glands, all of us running around on a planet, that our pineal glands are the individual synapses of the global brain. So it was his way of kind of saying you can tap into the great memory of everything because it's all one brain, if you like. So that was one idea, quite interesting. And another one at the bottom was the Pella tradition. In Cornwall, the name for witches or cunning folk is Pella. So it's kind of like folk magic or cunning magic of the Cornwall area. Now, there were some Pella witches in a part of Cornwall called the Lizard. It's a promontory into the English Channel. And they had an unusual way of looking at the land and working with the land. And that intrigued me because it was almost the same as Professor Reiser's ideas, but they had an extra ingredient. So the Pella tradition in Cornwall looked at its own landscape and described a field of energy all around the land. So that could be the psychosphere. But because it's local and it's just the immediate vicinity, it appears to be horizontal, like a blanket. It's like a blanket of energy in your area. This could apply to wherever you're living. So the Pella witches had this horizontal field energy. And then they also described vertical energy coming up from the center of the planet, coming up and going off into the space, going off into the atmosphere, going off into the stars. So for the Pella witches, there's a horizontal field of energy and a vertical penetration going through that horizontal field. And for the Pella witches, wherever the vertical penetrated the horizontal, that was a place of power, like a acupressure point on the landscape. And they would use those places of power to do their magic, to do their folk magic or what have you. You know, who knows what they were up to. But it is an interesting way of looking at your landscape and deciding or learning or listening to where are the places of intrinsic energy, intrinsic power, just like acupressure points on the human body. So I'm going to stop my presentation in a minute. My theory then was, and this is just what I'm exploring at the moment. So if you get the card mycelium in a reading, what does it mean? It means the interconnectedness of things, of all things. But more importantly, as a druid type person or a person that wants to connect with life on this planet, you know that there are 3 energy centers in your body, and this is traditional Celtic lore, the 3 cauldrons. Your lower cauldron is a way of connecting to the vitality of the land, to the mycelium network through your soles of your feet. Comes up your kidney channels to your lower cauldron. And then your middle cauldron is all about your heart, you know, your soul. And so it's the soul connection between people. And that's a type of mycelium as well. So that's more to do with, yeah, I don't even know how you would describe it, but it's the connection between soulmates and family. So it's love, I suppose. Love is the best word to describe that. Then you've got the mycelium inside your body, which is your neurological system. All of your nerve endings are a type of mycelium, and that's the energy flowing through your body. And then in this vehicle that's walking around at this moment in time on the planet, this is the headquarters, you know, and the headquarters with its pineal gland is making sense of everything. So it's receiving the dreams and visions. It's trying to evaluate what those dreams and visions mean. And it's the pineal gland that communicates. So that's the telepathy between people. You know, it's different to the soul connection. The soul connection is more about feeling how someone is rather than being mental and sending a communication and receiving a verbal communication, if you like. But so that's 3 types of mycelium that this card would represent. And all of it is relevant to what you do in your own grove. The physical mycelium to the life force of the planet, the heart mycelium between soulmates and kindred spirits, and then the mental neurological mycelium of communication and telepathy. So anyway, there's just ideas, and we can spend the rest of this session talking about that. I'll put the presentation away and you can put your microphones back on. I'm sure you've all got experiences of psychic communication and so on. You know, I do. For me, it's very normal, but hard to quantify and explain.
I have a thought on that. one of my most potent psychic experiences in a shamanic class, and we're drumming, right? So I think there was a resonant. So when we broke off in pairs to, um, you know, get impressions of what was going on with the other person. It was really for me, connection was really strong. And I think the you know the resonant connection in our energy fields from the drumming was probably a really big part of it.
Mhm.
And I think the receptivity of the person I was working with too, because he was really looking for some answers, and not that I knew what answers I was giving, but I gave him images that were really meaningful to him. So, those are two ideas I have.
Well, I've had some experience with this. I really like this presentation. Thank you, Yuri. Um, the you're talking about the psychosphere, and what it brought to mind for me was Carl Jung's idea of the collective self, except maybe up here instead of this. Uh, but it to me to be similar, if not the same. And the whole idea of the horizontal energy and the vertical energy really rings true for me because that's how I've experienced the energy of the earth and kind of psychic stuff that's going on in me. Excuse me. I have meditation that I use a lot and that I used to use when facilitated a women's recovery group, and it takes place in the psychosphere without going into the whole meditation. It ends up in the psychosphere and it takes place in the sphere. And I was all wondering why we always ended up where we ended up. And it's because it was in the psychosphere, connecting with buddy, especially if there's like one of those worldwide peace meditations. That's right where I go, like stepping into a circle of hands and energy that goes all the way around the world. And that's what you were talking about. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, another thing that occurred to me when you were about the vertical energy, is there a group of people here, and then there are people all over the world, probably lots where you guys are at, that study bioenergetics, Dr. Ibrahim work. And so they have learned ways to identify or find those power spots. And apparently, I saw a presentation where they can even do it on a map. They don't, have walk on the land. I don't know that I could exactly explain it at this moment, but like if somebody wanted on their land where would be a good place to place something or a spot. Oh, the pendulum
Yeah, it's
over a map.
dowsing. It's
Yeah, dowsing.
yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't though that they could do it on a map. I guess I
Mhm.
hadn't seen
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
previously.
And that's related to something that's called remote viewing.
Yes.
So you can pick up impressions about a place in another country you've never been to by remote viewing. It's a type of dowsing.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So
I really liked,
sorry.
I was just going to say, when first point of contact, the is the cauldron floor and how it comes and rises up. And my archetypal gate, my favorite and most comforting place in the world is redwood forest. And whenever anything, and I go there a lot anyway, but whenever anything is unsettling to me, I know I step into it and immediately I get energy coming back and sort of reading itself, so that I can deal with whatever. I literally need putting my feet in the forest. It just reminded me how much I work that lower carbon.
Yeah, Joey, that's interesting because I've spoken before about my connection to the redwoods. Considering I live in England, it seems a bit of a birth thing, but I do have a really huge connection. And that taught me a lot over the years of how to communicate nature. And for a lot of my earlier life, I pushed away anything psychic, or I was quite afraid of it. And then Kundalini rose. Boy, I thought I was going insane because somebody would walk into my clinic room and I'd know what was wrong with them. I'd say, "Oh, you've with blah blah." Who know that? Now, I think the problem is that we have given away an awful lot of our, and we are all multi-dimensional beings that are experiencing things on so many different frequencies. What is doing, connecting through the mycelium is amazing because everything from one source. So we are all connected.
Yeah.
And it's only our logical minds that prevent us from having access to all of this. And it's really exciting, but we do need to give it some grounding and some sort of explanation because we're in between this rebirthing at the moment, as we all know, with the Armageddon that is going on and the rebirthing is happening. But when we connect with one another through love, which is what the planet is teaching us, we are capable of anything. And that's what we've forgotten. And that's what nature, I believe, is reteaching us.
Yes. Yeah. And you can walk into the redwoods, you can stand inside them, sit and meditate.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
I have been,
spectacular.
Been in places that I shouldn't have gone in, which is so typical of me. You know, you're not supposed to go into that bit. Oh, good. I'm going in and having a look. But I do think, you know, with the cauldron and how it reacts with us and how we, as in inverted commas, 3D, 4, 5D beings can get our head around it, I think is truly beautiful. And I know years ago when I was married, the phone would ring, you know, before mobile phones. Who's that on the phone, Rosemary? And I'd say, it's so-and-so. I just knew who was phoning. I never thought about it. It just, I didn't think that I couldn't do it. And it's children, you know, you look at children can do so many things. And because teachers, parents, you know, say, "Oh, no, that doesn't exist. You can't see a fairy. Oh, no, you can't see an elf. Oh, no, you can't see any coming from that tree."
Yeah.
And so we suppress. I'm sure you found that, Yuri, with your son. The more you allow him to be open, the more you discover through him. And our teachers are our children. You know, which
they find the extraordinary in everyday things because there is magic. You can easily access it and sustain awareness of it.
Hey, if I can jump in.
Jump in.
Andrew.
Hey,
Please.
I actually saw a fly garrick today in the Scots Pine Woods, which was quite a surprise actually, because it's like a bit late. So that was nice. That's a bit of magic. And yeah, something as well I've been really interested in last couple of years is around the fascia system in the body.
Mhm.
And like the fascia being all throughout the body, and you know, I almost think of it like the soil. So you've got like the mycelium, which is obviously growing through the soil, but like the fascia is like the soil, and you know, so that's connecting everything in between all the mycelium, like just like in our brains, the fascia, and in our bodies, the fascia is connecting everything. So it's like, you know, adding to what Rosemary is saying is like, I feel like the more like knowledge that science getting body works with the fascia and with all the other discoveries is really like actually, yeah, we're completely connected to all the information and to each other. And yeah, you know, as a gardener, like the soil is like where it's at for, and the roots and all they're like mycelium as well, aren't they? The roots, you know, it's like everything is working together, and the
They have an
mycofascial
intelligence.
release as well.
But
So
even
one last
when
thing, the mycofascial release,
Mhm. Mhm.
massage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
People are having like all traumas that were locked in their bodies and their
Yeah.
fascia, and then if you just really massage them, then people are able to release traumas that they've been on for a long time as well. So I think the fascia really goes hand in hand with the talk of neurons and myceliums.
Yeah, each cell, when you have an experience, is traumatic, emotionally or physically, accidents of any description, or goes in through the solar plexus, it affects you. And each cell has a memory of that emotion. And it's actually emotion from the cells that will bring healing. I particularly loved what you were saying, Yuri, about the fact that the microdosing is helping, you know, with the nervous system. Because in America, I do have a friend I know from England, they are American, and he has a weird thing, and they've tried everything. And he's gone from being a very person, and they can't really diagnose it other than know it's a neurological thing. You know, going from very active person to almost being totally disabled now. So I'm going to ask her, because I'm seeing her on Tuesday, whether they've tried microdosing. So thank you for that,
it's
because
really
we're always looking ways to heal, and different modalities, different things help different people.
really
A bit
interesting.
of
Andrew was talking about the fascia, which is the very fine, almost web-like membranes between muscles and everything. So it's not the neurological system. But the current theory is, and they didn't have this scientific awareness centuries ago, but with Chinese theories of qi and reflexology and everything, and qi moving through the body, it's not through the blood or the bones. They think now it's the fascia that is moving through that very fine cobweb of the body. And it just struck me, I don't know if it was Andy or who mentioned it, but trauma in the body becoming illness reminded me of being able to go to a place like a castle or somewhere and to pick up on the memory of things that happened at that location, that the body itself with its fascia, it is it holding the memory of trauma, you know, that whether it's dis-ease in the body from mental issues or whether it's an impact from being hit by a car, you know, that the body is holding on to the memory of that trauma, even if it was in your childhood. Somehow it's holding on to that memory. So restoring the wasteland or healing the land has to go back to the flow of energy through the body and the fascia and the chi and so on.
Well,
Really?
you know, the other thing that you were talking about as far as the psychosphere, and then Andrew bringing up this whole thing about fascia. I am trained in cranial sacral work. And the third level of training with cranial sacral work is where you aren't even touching the body. You barely touch the body when you do use cranial sacral, but on the third level, you're not even, you're just holding your hands over these points that you're guided to. And so it's like, it just, to me, it just it actualizes the idea that, you know, we're not just physical, emotional, but we're also spiritual bodies, you know, there's like 7 or 9 bodies above us, you know, and that, you know, when you tune into that and feel that, what happens with cranial sacral is that they're saying that all illness is from dis-ease, like you're talking about. There are energy blocks in the body, like Rosemary was talking about. So when you're actualizing this this point that you're feeling this blockage in, you're allowing it to the true memory of soul safety, and you allow it to release. Oh, I love that Andrew brought that up, because I was thinking about that actually when you were talking about it, and our connectivity to all things. You know, it's not just that we can do, you know, this Reiki work or this cranial sacral work on each other, but we can also give and take through touching the earth, and just even envisioning that we're tuning into the earth. So I don't know if any of that speaks to anything, but
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's lovely, Manna, because I think that also it's a receptive thing as well. I mean, I know you all know that if people are open and receptive to receive, it's much easier. And nobody can force anybody to do anything they don't want to do.
right.
And you can't override a soul's journey. That is that soul's journey. And, you know, I do sometimes get people look at me in a funny way and they say to me, "Oh, you know." And I say, "What do you mean I know?" "No, I don't know. I can only know something if your higher being gives me that information and you want me to know." I mean, why would you want to know about everybody you see and meet? Your head would be like a total
Crazy, right?
tangled ball of wool. You wouldn't be able to do anything. But I think that being open and receptive is so important. And, you know, we have the ley lines and the energy lines and the meridians going through the planet, and we have them going through us. And this psychosphere, was that what you called it, Urian? It's how it all connects. We think of ourselves as being separate, but we're not. It's just a question of plugging in and being open to receive it. There is nothing we can't do. I know that I can teleport. I've not been aware of doing it, but I've been seen in 2 places at the same time. So I know I can do it, but my mind here as Rosemary Hanson hasn't got her head round it. So, and if it's for something that's good, you know, years ago I had people, she was going to go and have a surgery, an elderly lady, and I said to her, you know, "I'll be with you, you know, I'll be thinking of you." And when she came back a month later, she said, "Oh, thanks for being there at the hospital." And I said, "I didn't come to the hospital." "Yes, you walked down as they were wheeling me down to the operating theatre." I had no memory of it at all, but apparently I was there. So because we're thinking in a box and we've got to expand our awareness. And the thing that brings it all about is actually sharing love. You know, and a lot of what's been going on is it's pushing up all our dark side. We want to stop now. We want to do the meditation.
Yeah, but I just finished by agreeing with you, saying it's all about love. And the main way the forest uses the mycelium is to heal itself. It can tell when a tree is suffering, and it will send energy and nutrients. So it's the whole network is about the forest being aware of itself and healing itself. So it's a healing thing. Anyway, we better do our meditation. So I'll stop recording and put your microphones off.